So today what we're going to do is we'll start off like normal, which means we're going to take a breath. Um, I'm going to give myself a little smudge over here, and then I'll after a little uh, slowing down and getting connected, I'm going to talk a little bit about prophecy in spiritual traditions around the world, in particular, looking at prophecies about the end of the world. And what do those prophecies have in common? What makes them different? Now, it's actually a huge topic. People specialize in this. So I'm going to be doing more of what you might call a high level overview so that we can make sure that we have time to go around the, the screen and let people make comments or add questions. Now, one of the couple of things that are different about doing this online, we finish just before 12 o'clock. We shoot for 11:50. Sometimes it's a little bit later, but that's sort of the goal. Also, one thing that's different is that maybe what I'll do is I'll finish a little bit earlier with my sharing, and then as we go, if a specific question is a part of what you share, I'll just address it quickly on the spot, because probably by the time everyone goes, we'll be getting to the end. So does that sound good? Does anyone have any questions? If you have questions, wave your hand. And if
Sounds good.
everything sounds good, awesome. And if everyone's good, just give a thumbs up. And if everyone's happy to be here, wave to your new friends. Yay. All right. So with that, if whatever you want to do to take a moment to get centered, we always like to get centered before we connect. I got my little smudge bowl here. So I'm going to invite you now to just take a moment. You don't have to do this for long, but sit comfortably but alert. I'm going to encourage you to close your eyes. And closing your eyes, breathing in through your nose. Really, really big breath in, really, really big breath in, and then something like a sigh, a release, a relief. And you can do that a few times as you just feel yourself settling into the comfort of our circle. And for this short time, feel the safety, the warmth, and the peace of our connection in a time of great chaos in the world. Now connecting more with the exhale, but letting it be soft, letting it be long, really long. You're just breathing out any stress, worry, fear. And then listening, actually listening and tuning in to the feeling of stillness and silence in yourself. As you connect with the quiet, the stillness, remember that this is the place where we are connected. In our stillness, in our silence, we are united. We are together as those sitting side by side. And in this moment of connection, if you like, you can just extend a feeling, a prayer, a wish, a hope of blessing for everyone in this circle, for everyone in need, anywhere and everywhere. And of course, a very special prayer for this country, the United States, and the upheaval and change, chaos and resolution that is unfolding before our very eyes. May it all be for the highest good. And may harmony and change swiftly come with as much ease and grace as possible. And staying with your eyes closed, if you will, I'm going to share a little reading by Gary Lawless. And it's really a reflection about time. Little by little, roads eat away at the heart of mountains. Fires burn through, come back in huckleberries. Trails close in August. Too many bears. Too many bears now following avalanche shoots, glacier lily, early spring. Caribou in old growth spruce. Lichen, banks of snow and fog, bear tracks in the mud. Treat each bear as the last bear, each wolf as the last, each caribou. Each track is the last track, gone spoor, gone scat. There are no more deer trails, no more flyways. Treat each animal and place as sacred, each minute our last. Ghost hooves, ghost skulls, death rattles and dry bones. Each bear walking alone in warm night air. So, on that delightful note, yes, Trisha? I don't know that can you unmute yourself?
Who's the author?
Gary Lawless. Gary, Lawless.
And is this a book of his collection or something else?
No, this is a book that I have recommended before that I quite love and read and reread. I've had this in my collection for probably 30 years. And it's called Earth Prayers.
Oh, okay.
And it's definitely a treasure.
I used to have that. So.
Yeah, I think probably most of us had it at one point. But it's reprinted and re-released. It's got a new cover. So that's a great one. While we're talking about such collections, the other two that I love, I can't reach that one. There's also this one. I don't know if this one is still available, but I believe it was done by the same people, Prayers for 1,000 Years. And that is just amazing. I think it is the same people. Elizabeth Roberts. So to review all the prophecies of the world is really a university degree. But I thought briefly I would touch on some of them just to give you a sense. Now, some of you have read about these things and some of you haven't. And so when we talk about prophecies, you know, some of the things that come to mind that I'm thinking of, I think about the Hopi prophecy that became quite well known. I think about the ghost dance movement that really wasn't that long ago in the scheme of things. I don't remember the exact date, probably about 200 years ago or so. I think of the Hindu prophecy of the changing of ages. We've heard of the Kali Yuga. I think of the astrological prophecies, and most of you remember the dawning of the age of Aquarius and the great song that went with that. Of course, we can't forget the Bible that has a delightful section on the end of days, something to look forward to. And of course, the Mayan tradition has become very celebrated in its talking about the end of times. Now, one of the things that is curious is that most of them have little clear chronology. In other words, people have wondered for generations if these were literal end of days that they were talking about, if these were literal end of days, but renewal of days, or if the whole thing was actually more metaphorical of the human experience. And you can see those are two pretty different things. So one perspective is these stories and teachings and scriptures tell us that this is all coming to an end, period. And that whatever comes after is in another dimension. It's heaven. It's not this world. However, most of them suggest that this is about a renewal of time, and that the end of time, the end of the ages, actually means the beginning of a new age. And then there certainly are many people that have argued that this has never really been about an actual cataclysmic worldwide end. It's truly more about the human experience and the way we all go through these cycles of death and renewal, and that in some ways, perhaps from a Jungian perspective or a mythological perspective, that's really the best way to look at these things. Now, we can't forget, thinking of the first interpretation, there are many people on the planet today still who genuinely believe that these were literally true, and that literally the world is going to end, and literally only some people will be saved. That's pretty heavy duty. That is not really the interpretation we're going to take today. Now, let's start moving into some of the broad themes and what they might mean for us. Well, first of all, the reason why I feel pretty confident looking at the end of days themes broadly is because there are just so many of these stories and prophecies in the world. So if it was just, let's say, the Christian tradition that had this, then I might think, wow, like that's curious and compelling, and do they know something we don't? But then when you kind of find out, well, no, there's, as I say, Hopis, Mayans, Lakotas, Hindus, Chinese prophecies. And so, I mean, no, this is actually too similar to what too many people have said. So this must be an expression of something broader, an expression of human consciousness, an expression of the structure of human psychology and so on. On the other hand, we have to be careful that we don't reduce these things to mere psychology, because all of these old teachings came at a time where intuition was very much a part of life, a part of how we know things, a part of how we communicate things. And so maybe there was something literally true embedded in the story and in the mythology. One of the things that's complicated, of course, is language. So when we look at some of the Pueblo prophecies, they talk about the different worlds. In fact, even in this era of humanity, the idea is that we came up through a sipa, through a hole in the ground, into this world, as though literally one world ended, or we departed and we came into this world. Again, in the Christian tradition, we have this reference to being with God in heaven. In the Lakota tradition, they talk about the buffalo, this cosmic buffalo that is slowly losing its hair and its faculties and even its legs as we come to the end of days. And the teaching goes that right now, I mean, it unfortunately sounds almost like a joke, but the buffalo is basically bald and has no more legs. Like, this is it. Hindu tradition, same thing, turning of the eras. But let's take a moment and go to the Mayan tradition, because one thing that makes it very distinct is that they had a calendar and they actually ascribed dates to the end of time, which makes their prophecy pretty cool and pretty distinct. Now, we don't know that we're interpreting things correctly, but it seemed pretty clear to scholars that the year 2012, whether it was the turning of 2012, whether it was the spring solstice of 2012, or whether it was the conclusion of 2012, that the year 2012 seemed to be pretty accurately congruent with their time cycles, which would mean that we're in it. Now, if you're not sure whether we're in it or not, that's fine. It's for everyone to decide. If you'd like some compelling evidence that we might be in the end of days, turn on the news because it's pretty crazy, right? I mean, we have just had literally a worldwide virus that has shut down economies and communities. We, in this country, which is only one of hundreds, but in this country, we are seeing extreme upheaval in all manners, political, racial, economic, aggravated by the COVID pandemic, and then ignited by the George Floyd murder and other murders of innocent Black people this year. So a lot of people are asking the question, whoa, is this what they were talking about? Is this the end of days? And if so, how do we interpret it? I mean, does it just mean that we should go inspect our bunkers and do a final order from Costco with all our favorite snacks so that we can pack it in and be okay? Or does it mean we should be preparing for something? So many of you were fortunate to see, or at least to know, that Greg Braden, a very popular teacher and author, some would say a scholar of world religion and natural earth sciences, came to Althea. And he was famous in some point in his career for his commentary on the Mayan calendar. I know Greg spends quite a few weeks of every year in the Yucatan. Actually, it's a funny side story, but I used to live down there and I knew Greg, and Greg came for the opening of the center I ran down there with Don Miguel Ruiz and Alberto Violdo. We actually did it on the spring solstice of 2012. It was very much in honor of what we're talking about, this idea of moving into the new age. And then 2 years later, or a year and a half later, I was just, I don't know, I think I was just with my son at one of the ruins, Coba ruins in the middle of the Yucatan. And, guess who comes out of the men's room? But it was Greg Braden, and we ran into each other. That was kind of a funny thing. Anyway, the point of the story is that Greg, along with other scholars, pointed out that most of the traditions that these apocalyptic messages came from were actually rooted in a earth consciousness, in cyclical time consciousness, which meant that none of them, or few of them, I should say, believed that the end meant the end of humanity or the end of the planet. What they believed, generally speaking, was that it meant that it was the end of the world as we knew it, which was also a famous REM song. And the idea was that paradigms would change in such a radical way, paradigm meaning worldviews would change in such a radical way that it would be like a new world, almost unrecognizable in change. Now, the other thing that was really significant that Greg pointed out was that the Mayan calendar follows astrological cycles. And the interesting thing that astronomers, not astrologists, astronomers have been able to corroborate is that the Earth, this is now, I'm doing a demonstration here, this green ball is the Earth, this dark ball, which is actually billions of years old. This is one of the oldest stone forms on the planet. This is Chrysocolla. It has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. The idea is that the galaxy itself, right, is rotating, and that the Earth in the galaxy is, as you know, moving in relationship to the sun, but it's not a perfect circle, right? It's an ellipse. And by coincidence, in the year 2012, the Earth was at its furthest point in the ellipse away from the sun, meaning in some astronomical sense, it was let's say the darkest hours of the earth were literally as dark as they will ever be for the next something like 5,325 years. So again, the idea is you have the earth going around the sun, but then you have the galaxy rotating itself and everything in it turning, everything's turning, and that the earth in 2012 was literally as far away from the light as possible. Now, why is that significant? It's significant because it's understood to be a very meaningful metaphor for what we're facing, which means that when you get to the furthest point, the good news is you're now turning back. The difficult news, or you might say the bad news, is if the last years as you get to the extreme of darkness were pretty scary and looking like, you know, the environment's going to collapse and nuclear, tensions are higher, nuclear costs are higher, and so on. You would think then, well, when we reach the end point, it all starts getting better. Well, sure, it starts getting better, but in terms of a cycle, it means you're going to have to go through a whole bunch more darkness before it's noticeably getting lighter. Does that make sense? So you almost want to think about the middle of the night. If the middle of the night is the darkest moment, and from that moment you start moving towards the light, it doesn't get bright right away. It's not bright until morning. What changes is that you now know that the distance to the darkest point is now behind you. And what follows is an ever shortening time towards total transformation and light. Now, we could go on, and I'm willing to answer any questions. We'll take a moment just for some general questions. But to conclude, so we have time to go around, what I'd like to share today is that it seems important that we consider, why not? This is the end of an era. This is the end of an age. When we look at human consciousness, and many of you have heard me talk about this, we're talking about the beginning of a new phase in human consciousness. We've been through what I call the horizontal, the earth-based or primal. We went into the axial, or what I call vertical, and we are now going into what I personally believe was really prophesized in the Christian tradition. It's just my opinion, and I really believe was prophesized by Jesus, was it's now the time for the intersection of the two worlds, the horizontal and the vertical, that the masculine and the feminine must come together, people of all colors must come together, technology and nature must come together, materialism and spirituality must come together. It's the age of convergence. Now, the last thing that I would share, some might say, well, how do you know that's true? And maybe this is just going to precede another era of change. Well, of course, there's going to be another era of change. That's inevitable. On the other hand, what I can suppose, and I suppose you can do the same as well, is that if we don't have this integration, we're just not going to make it. We're just not going to make it. And I don't think there's a lot of doubt in the scientific community about that, because we've just pushed the limits of our habitat too far, right? We're at the point where we're now doing deep sea underwater mining in the ocean. We've depleted fish stocks to a point where they're almost irretrievable. Air pollution has gone beyond control in most of the major cities in the world. We could go on and on. Forget climate change. We're pretty much screwed in every other way you can imagine, unless we have a total transformation. So, and from an optimistic perspective, what I would say is that the pain and upheaval we're seeing in this country today is a kind of physical depiction or a kind of physical expression of what is happening at the level of consciousness. And that when we relate to what's going on from the very personal level, it's remarkably painful. It's remarkably scary. It's remarkably sad and disgusting. But when we move back and take the perspective of the prophecy, the perspective of ages, the perspective of humanity, the perspective of the planet, well, I hate to say, but this is going to be a blip. We had the French Revolution. We had the fall of the Roman Empire. We've had genocide. We had the Second World War. I mean, we've been through on this planet, I hate to say, much, much worse than this. Even in the last 100 years. What's different is that what we're going through right now, we are going through more consciously, with more communication, and with more connection than ever. People are demonstrating all over the planet on behalf of race relations in the United States. People are choosing quarantine and face masks all over the planet, not because they even believe they're at risk, but just out of kindness and compassion for their neighbors. Of course, there's going to be dissenters. Of course, there's people that somehow feed themselves through divisiveness and division. That's always going to happen. But what's changed is, for the first time in the history of humanity, millions, arguably billions of people have been thrust into a time period in which every single day they have essentially been forced to think collectively. And even people that are embedded in the divisiveness are still waking up and thinking collectively. Because even if they hate China, and even if they hate Black people, and even if they think that Italy and Spain made all that up, they are thinking about the world as a whole every day. The myopia of my community, my religion, my race, my family has been dismantled. We have literally been immersed in global thinking. Now, I don't mean that we're all thinking the same way, but the simple realization that this is one planet for 3 months now, that is not even close to anything that's ever happened, ever. Not even close. So, to conclude, and I appreciate this wasn't as short as I said it would be, but I guess it never is. To conclude, that's amazingly hopeful. But it rests on the way we make decisions in this time of change. And, you know, I don't think I've shared this with a group, but, you know, I got a message. I text message my Lakota dad, Gene, pretty regularly, mostly just bad jokes and stupid emojis. But we had this brief exchange about, you know, what's going on right now. And, you know, his perspective as someone from a tradition with prophecy and someone who is looked to in his community to interpret it, you know, his perspective is that this is a moment of high energy for change. And that whatever you, like literally you, us on this call, whatever we think of at this time, whatever we pray about at this time, whatever we put our energy into this time will be amplified. This is like, for the Jewish people in the room, this is like the Rosh Hashanah of the millennia. We are in a time of high vibratory contact with the spirit world. And interestingly, in his tradition, you know, death isn't seen as a failure or a loss. It's just a change of states. It's a change of forms. And their belief, or what he offers, is that people that don't want to be on the planet for this change are leaving. And that's not because that's not to say that we can understand why they're leaving. Some have come as change makers. So in his tradition, George Floyd came with a mission, with an agreement at a soul level, whether he knew it or not, that he would be the catalyst, and that his departure wasn't too early, and that from his soul's purpose, it wasn't even unnecessary. From the soul's purpose and through the vision of the prophetic traditions, everyone is fulfilling their part. It doesn't mean it's not tragic and painful. In fact, it's difficult to say, but it's supposed to be tragic and painful. It had to be tragic and painful. Because if we look at some of the other violent deaths of Black people in 2020, didn't tip the scale. So whether it was Ahmed, who was hunted by a father and son like an animal, and it was filmed, a premeditated murder of a Black person only for sport, or whether it was Brianna, the EMT, who was shot in her sleep by police who broke into her apartment, and the only corroborating evidence they had to execute her without trial or communication was that she was Black and they were in the wrong apartment, wasn't enough. It just wasn't enough. And so the prophetic traditions actually believe that we in this moment must learn to find the balance between localized consciousness, the pain and indignation that is igniting the fire of change, and the rooted peaceful spirit consciousness that must have faith that if we choose well, if we take action, if we don't turn a blind eye, this will not be for nothing. This will be what we were all waiting for. So that's a big note to end on. And we have arguably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 people who are here on the call. And so what I'd love to do is just, invite everyone to take a couple minutes and of course, greet the group, share what might be on your mind, or if you have an insight or a feeling, and then we'll go on to the next person. If there's a pointed question, I promise to answer briefly, and we'll probably be going till just a couple minutes before 12. So it's hard to pick who goes first. I try to go by the screen so it's somewhat neutral. But based on my screen, Terry is actually a great place to start. At some point, I'm going to call out to Anna, Steffi, Emily, and Lawrence. We can't see you, but I will invite you to share if you like at some point. But we're going to start with Terry, and then we'll just move around the room. So I guess think of it as a couple minutes if you can shoot for that. Some people will be less, some people will be a little bit more. But we'd love to just hear what's in your heart and on your mind and what you'd like to say today. You are going to have to unmute yourself before you speak. So Terry, go for it.
Yeah, I'm setting a timer for myself for 2.5 minutes because I loved seeing you guys last week and I want to see everybody. I've been pretty engaged with the stuff around George Floyd. It's been excruciatingly painful and sometimes hopeful. My oldest daughter has gave a speech in a megaphone on top of a car last night at 11 o'clock. I got to watch it on Facebook. She has immunodeficiencies, so watching her be in those protests holding a microphone 20 other people held with no mask on has been a challenge, but I'm very proud of her. On what you said, Jonathan, George, there's a little 6-year-old girl, I don't know if it's his daughter, I think it is, who was asked how she felt about what happened to her daddy. And she said, my daddy changed the world. So that gets me. I also had the first level of the talk with Jarrell Sunday, which was painful. And yet he listened without bitterness. So he asked me if there would ever come a time in his life when there's no racism. And I said, I don't think so. That it's something that we always strive towards. But that I think it's kind of part of the human condition. And so, yeah, that's really been a lot. I have to say that watching you has been really helpful for keeping me grounded. And keeping this community in mind has helped me stay grounded. And what my daughter and I talk about when we're plotting and planning how she's going to do things is, you know, how to proceed in whatever she's doing with love. And so I feel hopeful, but it has been a difficult couple of weeks. I'll never be able to unsee that video. And we've been dealing with the terrorization of this forever. I just want to say the one other thing I want to say is it's not how many people have died or how they've died. It's having my daughter call me after being stopped for a taillight out and having to talk her down from being terrified. So I love you guys. Good to see you.
Thank you so much. Really. Thank you. And yes, I noticed Zoom doesn't have a clock. What a simple feature. That would make sense for all the meetings. But anyway, Barbara, you're next on my screen. So some words for the group.
So can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. The last part of your talk, where it led, is kind of my existence, because of the inner work and my spiritual communities. I have a lot of friends who feel that this is our work here is our inner work. And so we do that all the time. And we actually are very hopeful and very optimistic about all the things that are happening. And we have this same viewpoint about a person coming into this life for a reason. And so that takes, so then I'm not in the majority of my life, my daytime is not in duality, in this view versus this view. It's much broader, it's of hope. And I you know, reinforce that every day with my practice. And so it is hard to see it. And it's interesting. I went on a early morning hike this morning with a friend that I hadn't seen in a couple of years, but she and I worked together at one point very closely. In fact, we were business partners. And she lives in downtown Denver, and her take on all of this, just being who she is really different. But I found that when I could just be open to whatever would make her comfortable on this hike, that was the most important thing for me to do. And so so I don't know, sometimes, you know, the news is just not in my face, because I don't watch TV or listen to the radio, and I'm out in Lakewood, so it's away from, you know, all that stuff reminding me constantly, you know, it doesn't. So that's where I am.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And thank you for being there for your friend. It seems like something we need to do for each other. I am making a little, so we have a duck when we meet, so I can give people a warning for 2 minutes. Thank you, Barbara. Trisha, you are next up. If you would unmute yourself.
Okay. Now wait, am I on? Okay.
You're on.
Well, when you started with your topic, I wasn't quite sure where we, I mean, are we in the end of days, or is this the end of the world? And I don't really think that way, that we are, but it was a very powerful topic, the way that you presented it. So thank you. And I really liked what you said about his sole purpose, George Floyd, and that it was supposed to be tragic and hard. And I've been through this before, as we all have. I mean, I'm from California, so we had major riots in Los Angeles more than once. In fact, I was looking up the LA riots with Rodney King. I have a book that my father had with pictures, and just to see just to get a brief idea of that, just to remind myself that this is not, this has happened before. But as you said, the difference is that with the COVID thing, that there's a connection amongst all the world that we never had before. And that's what started out with when we all went into quarantine, and you see your neighbors, and everybody's in quarantine. When you say how, it's been a huge shift that I have never experienced before. And I think seeing the response all over the world to George Floyd's death is astounding. I mean, it's really unexpected. That has not happened to this extent. I don't know if it's ever happened, where you have people in other countries who are protesting and marching, and I think it is a moment in time. But personally, it's really hard. It's very hard. It's just been hard for me. It's like I'm up. I feel, and then I feel down. I feel like I'm treading water sometimes, and just trying to keep my prayers going. So that's all.
Thank you. Next on my screen is Nancy. If you want to unmute yourself, say hello. Yeah.
Well, I feel a lot of sadness and anger both. I kind of go around the block several times with different feelings. But one of the things that, and I also feel it feels like an ending of some kind. It's just making space for beginning. I felt that for some time in different ways. The thing that's interesting to me is what you said, that when you talked about that was George's karma, or his calling for life. When I know people personally, I often have that sense of, I can feel their life. I can feel sort of what their life is about. I may not be able to verbalize it, but I can feel this is kind of what this life seems to be about. But since I didn't know him, it's really a different feeling. It's hard to, get that same relationship, I guess, to the situation. Although in theory, I totally get that, and have felt that, many times in different ways. So I think that's kind of the problem with the communication that we're in the middle of, is that some of those really close nuances that we can feel in other human beings is really absent, or harder to feel. So.
Thank you. Short and sweet. Yeah, it's an interesting theme. I'm not going to comment much because we're going to keep going, but I think we're all kind of learning how to feel into each other in a new way. Not only because we're now connecting with epic things like George Floyd's death, but we've just been separated from each other. So I thought you got me thinking about that. Okay, thank you. Our next in line, we have three people we can't see. You're next on my screen, Lawrence, Anna, and Steffi. So sometimes that means people may want to be doing other things. That's fine if you want to pass. Lawrence, you're first up. Would you like to say something? If so, unmute and join in. And you're also okay to pass if you need to.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. You have 2 minutes on the clock.
Hi, Jonathan. Thanks for maintaining this weekly ritual.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
You were talking about cycles, and if you were a child that was born in California, Arizona, or Florida, and you moved to Minnesota at the age of 12, and it started snowing in the winter, you might think it was the end of times as you knew it. But the wise ones around you would remind you that spring is on its way and things will become green again. So these cosmic cycles are so long, thousands of years, I don't think any of us have lived or can remember any of those cycles, but we are. And your explanation of our universe moving, or our cosmos moving through the universe, is it's a vast picture to imagine. And the energies are changing. I feel them. I'm a man, but recently, in the past 5 months, around the full moon, I have felt very strange feelings. I don't know what they are, but I believe, as the elders have taught us, that we are moving through a period of change. And if you're in a practice of meditation, you're going to feel those probably more than people that are in the busyness of life. Spirit usually doesn't show up in the noisy moments. It shows up in the quiet moments. So I'm excited for the change. I'm excited that we're moving through the cosmos to a new frequency, to a new resonance, to a new energy. And there are people that won't make it through to that change. They are choosing to leave, and maybe consciously or unconsciously or subconsciously. So I just want to encourage everybody to enjoy the ride and smell the flowers.
Thank you very much. Very good advice. Smell the flowers while you can. Thank you, Lawrence. Anna, you are next on the screen.
Okay.
We can now
do you
see
hear
you.
me? Okay.
Yeah, we hear you well.
Okay. So, yeah, a lot has been happening also in my, original country in Hong Kong. A lot of riot last year, and then now COVID. So similar thing is happening here. Over there also a lot of students learn how to make the gas bombs and destroy all the universities. And so I certainly hope, this is it will mean a new beginning, or which I'm not sure, but I guess it will only get better from here. And trying to be hopeful and optimistic, And thank you for holding this for us. And it's always good to not just get into the news and watch too much and have a different view about it. Thank you.
Thank you. And really, I think you said what's at the heart of it all, which is we have to face what is real, but stay hopeful and keep our hearts open. Steffi, are you there? Would you like to say something? Let's wait a moment. Maybe no. All right. Kate, we got you. Will you unmute yourself and take a minute or two?
All right.
Share with us.
Did that work?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Oh boy. Well, I'm just going through a lot of ups and downs emotionally. But I do understand what's happening. But I think my take on it is there's so much multi-sensory perception going on with us, 20% or whatever we are of the population in the world that are conscious of this change and conscious of, and we feel it, and we feel a lot. And for me, it's just trying to find that balance of self-care and seeing that, trying to understand that, I have seen this discrimination go on in my own neighborhood growing up between blacks and whites and the police. And I've had an incident where a policeman got very abusive with me verbally because I just wanted to ask him about why the ducks are being killed around the park. And I'm trying to understand where they're coming from and how they're trained and how they get to that point where they can do something like kill someone, as what happened. And it's true, it's come to a head. And I think politics is coming to a head. And I think I am hopeful there's change, but right now it feels really, really awful. I mean, it's just a constant coping, and with the full moon happening, and there's just it's stirring things up for me. I'm not even hardly sleeping. So, but I know too that this will pass, and I like the Mayans' version of how they see things. And I've been down there in the Mayan ruins in Mexico, and you know what? They were a real community, though. The way they built their walls, you could tell that they were all connected to each other. And I wish for that. I wish I had that right now.
Well, we have our online community.
Yeah, I know.
I'm sorry.
I know. It's just, yes.
Yeah, we need each other more than ever. So thank you. Thank you for saying that. We still have a little bit of time left. And Sue, Joni, and then we got a little note. Steffi is there and does want to say a hello. So not to rush you, Sue and Joni, but here you go. Sue, you're next.
Okay, I'll make it really quick.
Not to rush you, but hurry up.
Let me go get the duck. I have a duck. I'll go bring it for myself. Yeah, I kind of, I agree with Jean. And I had also read a book from Sylvia Brown that was talking about the soul's purpose and the agreements that we have when we come to this place for, intense learning and consciousness raising. So when things like this happen, I struggle. I flip back and forth between, thinking that George Floyd's death was, that he agreed to that, and because he would be a catalyst for change, which we're obviously seeing, not just even in Minnesota, but worldwide. So I understand that. And also I would have to say our current administration, we'll just say, I believe that is also being used as a catalyst for change and raising consciousness, no matter how uncomfortable that is. And the homeless people and the drug addicts and everything else. So I see that. I do believe, my higher self understands that, but at the same time, watching people go through this and whatever is really difficult. So I'm kind of trying to find a little equilibrium here in that balance. And, I have to say that, again, thank you to you so much for what you're doing. And we all appreciate it. And I think it's really helping. and the meditations and the lovely places you're going. You need to tell us where you're going though, so we can.
No.
But yeah, no, or
I'm
don't.
teasing. I'm teasing. Thank you.
I will send you a text with the name of a great hike that you can go on. That we just discovered, kind of in your neck of the woods too. So.
Oh, great.
All right, that's all I got.
Thank you. All right, in the final minute, and if you don't know, I'm actually starting a class right now on another channel as soon as we get off. So Joni, is there anything you want to say for a quick goodbye, and then
Yeah.
Steffi, be ready? Oh, I think she might be gone. Okay,
Okay.
Joni, I guess you get to
Real
close
fast.
it up.
Real fast. I came in, I almost missed today because I was in my meditation, an incredible meditation this morning for hours. And, this year I've in the past couple of years, I've learned how to hold space for others and what that leads to. Earlier this year, I learned how to hold our community in my heart and what that's opened up for me. And this morning, I was sitting there for hours holding the entire world in my heart. And it was just such an expansive, extraordinary moment. And I have no idea where this will take me and what will come out of this, but I am beyond grateful for this moment that we're in. That's it.
Thank you, Joni. Well, it's a beautiful note to end on. And I can say from experience that in the hardest moments of my life, the single most catalytic and transformative practice has been to just keep my heart open. And it doesn't mean that I didn't suffer. I did. But what it does mean is it moves the experience somewhere deeper in myself so that I can learn and learn in a way that changes things for me forever. On that note, despite how quickly I need to go, I'd still like to finish mindfully. So I have a little reading. If you'd like to close your eyes, we'll close with this. Love and gratitude to everyone here. And then we'll hang up. Remember the circle of the sky, the stars and the brown eagle, the supernatural winds breathing night and day from the four directions. Remember the great life of the sun breathing on the earth. It lies upon the earth to bring out life upon the earth, life covering the earth. Remember the sacredness of all things, running streams and dwellings, the young within the nest, the hearth for the sacred fire, the holy flame of life. So thank you, one and all, for being here. Stay connected to each other. Don't be shy about emailing each other and calling each other. Lots of love, and let's make this a change we don't have to go through again. So I'll see you later, and some of you I'll see on my Facebook page in 30 seconds. Bye.
Bye.